14 after 8 o'clock. Welcome back to the show. It is a Monday morning. Great to be with you after a break during the Mubarak month of Ramadan. And we're going to kick off right away by talking to senior economist Dawie Roodt. We are going to be looking at the Russian oil ban. And this, according to the EU, is to make Putin pay a high price for his incursion or the war on Ukraine. But before we get to all of that, I'm kind of wondering, what was Dawie Roodt and his family thinking by making a trip to Russia? Dawie Roodt, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the program. And
Thank you very much.
I'm so glad that you're back home safe in South Africa. Goodness me, what was that all about?
Thank you very much for that. I'm very relieved to be back with my family and I. Well, I'm married to a Russian girl, and we visited Russia for a wedding. And people ask me, "But are you crazy? Why do you go to Russia? The place is at war." But the place remember, Russia is a huge place. It's a very, very big country. There are no military activities within Russia itself. We went to a city called Sochi, where the wedding actually took place. It's a beautiful place. It's just a stunningly beautiful place. And of course, we spent some time in Moscow as well. But there were absolutely no signs of any military activity. And I found this out before we went. I mean, there's no way I would have taken my kids to a place where I think they will be unsafe. In fact, it's far safer to be in Russia than to be in South Africa, if you look at the statistics at the moment. So that's we ended up in Russia. So we went to Russia to this wedding. It was really a very nice experience. And the kids had the opportunity to see Babushka again. That's their grandmother. And on our way back on the airport, just as we wanted to leave South Africa, the Russians or the customs people realized that the kids are actually Russian citizens as well. They've hold the
dual citizenship.
Yes, they came in on South African passports, and on our way out, they were asked, "Are they Russians or South Africans?" My wife mentioned that they are Russians, and we ended up in this specific queue for Russian citizens. And then they asked the question, "But why do they have only South African passports?" And then the trouble started, and they refused to let the kids go, saying that they need, according to Russian legislation, the kids need, or all Russians need, Russian travel documents to travel, and they only had South African passports, and they refused to let the kids go. They said we could go, we could leave the kids there, they will look after the kids, but we can't leave. And that meant that I had to go back in the middle of the night on the airport, me without money. Remember, there are sanctions against Russia that I couldn't use my credit cards because they excluded from the SWIFT system. We spent all the rubles because we were on our way out. In the middle of the night, the wife hysteric, the kids crying, no place to go to, no money, nothing on the airport in Domodedovo, that is in Moscow. Fortunately, we had our SIM card still, and we contacted some friends, and they brought us some money, and they made sure that we could get a place to stay. And from there on, we moved to one of the family members' flat, reapplied for passports for the kids, and eventually we came back on Saturday morning.
How long were you stuck in Russia under those difficult conditions, and were you well treated during that time?
Yeah, about 3 days that we were trying, 3-4 days, we were trying to get the passports and so on. We were, customs people and airport security people are difficult all over the world. So this is nothing new. I mean, they are people with very big stamps, and they are very, very powerful anywhere in the world. Doesn't matter where you are. So I don't like customs people. I can tell you that. But apart from that, we contacted the South African embassy in South Africa, or rather the Russian embassy in South Africa, and they really assisted us. And they helped us. But remember, Monday and Tuesday were public holidays in Russia. Nothing could happen anyway. So we had to wait it out anyway. But once we got things going, and once we started filling in the forms and so on, things went very, very smoothly. They treated us so well. They were so friendly and so efficient. You can't believe it. And literally after really applying for passports, the same day, actually, we got the actual passports. And then it was only a matter of trying to find flights back to South Africa again. So they treated, except for the customs people, but that's nothing new. They're exactly the same all over the world. But the rest of the day, we were really treated very nicely. And the people that when we contacted people and said, "Listen, we don't have cash. I don't have cash because I was not planning to stay longer in Russia, and my credit cards don't work because of sanctions. They came over that same night, and they brought me cash. They gave me money, and I haven't repaid all of that yet. I will of course do that now. But they were so nice and so supportive of our very difficult situation.
Okay, Darby. Now let's get to the heart of the matter, and that is so far, whatever we've been hearing about the war in the Ukraine, we're only seeing all the massive devastation, the heartbreak, the dead bodies lying on the streets, the towns and the cities absolutely devastated. But of course, there's been no retaliation by the Ukrainians on Russian cities and towns. It could be for a number of reasons. I do know you are an economist, but let's just move a little into the political sphere. Why is that? Does the Ukraine not have the military might to defend itself? Number one, and then also, obviously, other countries are reluctant to get involved
Yeah,
militarily because it could then end up
yeah,
with repercussions on them and a possible start of the Third World War. How do
yeah.
you read the situation?
This is we're going to talk for a couple of minutes now, and it's impossible to really to discuss everything here. I think what is important for everybody to understand is that there are many sides to a story. When you look at this specific, what is happening at the moment, there are many moving parts here, and I'm not trying to take any sides. I think a war is a horrible thing. You destroy lives and you destroy infrastructure and you destroy economies. It's bad. War is always bad. But having said that, I think it's important to understand that there are many facets to this. Like, for example, the eastern part of the Ukraine, the so-called Donbas area, the majority of people there are mostly Russian speakers. They belong to the Russian Orthodox Church, for example. They are pretty much Russians, and they see themselves as part of Russia. And historically, the Ukraine was basically part of Russia. In fact, Kiev was the first capital city of Russia. The same goes for the Krim. The Krim is historically was part of Russia. It was given to the Ukraine, I think somewhere in the 1950s or so, and the Russians considered that as part of the Russia, and it's always been part of Russia. That's the Russian view. Russians also think that there's been discrimination against Russian speakers in the eastern part of the Ukraine, but so that's the Russian kind of side of the story. The Ukrainian side of the story is that we have a big neighbor called Russia. They're trying to flex them, trying to re-establish the Soviet Union or the influence sphere of Russia. They are the aggressors. They're attacking the Ukraine, and we are defending ourselves. That is the Ukrainian side of the story, more or less. Um, so just try to understand the context of the whole thing. And again, I'm not trying to take sides. The invasion itself, I think strategically. So the first point is morally, they are all different sides of the story. Strategically, I think Putin made a big mistake here. Because he wanted to prevent the NATO, for example, to
That's
expand
right.
more to the east. And exactly that is going to happen now. Finland could join NATO, Sweden could join NATO, and maybe eventually other countries like Moldova and maybe even Ukraine can join NATO in the end. So that strategically was a big mistake. A second big mistake is that he underestimated the fighting spirit of the Ukrainians. I think that was another strategic mistake. Another strategic mistake is that if he wanted to destroy the identity of the Ukrainians, he achieved exactly the opposite. Suddenly, Ukrainian and the Russians don't see the Ukraine as really as a country. It's a very young country, actually. It's actually part of Russia as far as the Russians are concerned. But suddenly, the Ukrainians found their own identity. So I think on various levels, strategically, this was a big mistake. And I think Putin also underestimated the reaction of the West, especially as far as sanctions are concerned. So the political, let's call it the moral question: is this wrong or is it right? Remember, there are many sides to the story. Strategically, was this the right or the wrong decision to invade? And I would say it was the wrong decision. As far as the economy is concerned, it is without a doubt going to have a huge impact on the Russian economy and certainly on the Ukrainian economy. But at the moment, the Russian economy is not showing any signs of hardship. In fact, the Russian economy is really, well, my impressions were that is going
And
quite well in the Russian economy for now.
And this, despite the fact that there are sanctions against Russia,
Yeah,
undoubtedly the rest of us all around the world are beginning to feel the pinch of the sanctions. As we speak, I have heard that not only in South Africa, but it seems internationally, there's a huge shortage of jet fuel, which
yeah,
is going to have a very direct impact on local and international travel. It's going to obviously
yeah,
impact on pricing as well. So, where do we sit with this situation? And just before we respond to that,
yeah,
as in my previous question, I indicated we've seen the devastation of infrastructure and lives in the Ukraine. We haven't seen any such thing happening in Russia.
yeah.
What's the mood like? Of the people in Russia, and why has the Ukraine not retaliated? Have they not got the military might to retaliate against Russia?
Yeah, I think that is perhaps the reason why they haven't retaliated, why we haven't seen any military activity in Russia itself, because the Ukraine is a small country. It's a tiny country with a small army, basically. Um, um, Maybe a very important point that I just want to make as well, and that is that we in South Africa are mostly dependent on, let's call it Western media. We get our information from CNN and BBC, and that's the kind of information that we get. I have come across Western websites that are talking about explosions in and around Moscow, and especially around, yeah, in and around Moscow, and fires and all of that. And without a doubt, there is fake news on both sides of the divide here. We have to understand that. I've spoken to Russians about activity, military activity in Russia, or explosions in Moscow and all of that, and it's very clear there are, well, well, as far as they are concerned, there are no explosions there, nothing happening in and around Moscow. The Russians also, the way that the war is reported in Russia is quite factual. I don't understand Russian, or I know a few words and so on, but it's very factual. And the Russians, like in the West, are very much aware of the fact that you cannot believe everything that you hear, including what you hear from your governments. And maybe that's something that we in South Africa can learn from this whole situation, is that if you want to make sure about what's going on, try to find out yourself, because there's fake news all over the place. And the Russians are understanding that as well. And maybe we in South Africa can learn that from this whole situation. When it comes to your question about the impact on the economy, well, my first impression on Russia is that the economy is doing quite well. There are no shortages whatsoever. Everybody is talking about the business is doing quite well. People are complaining about rising prices. So inflation is becoming a problem. But of course, it takes some time before sanctions will have an impact on the Russian economy. So we don't see that yet. But I'm pretty sure that we will see a significant impact on the Russian economy. The Russians are not too concerned about this. They reckon they have all the resources, and they will be able to use their resource muscles, because they've got immense resources in Russia to achieve whatever they want to. Also, keep in mind that many big economies are still in support, well, are still doing business with Russia, like the Indians and like the Chinese, and many other economies are still open to the Russians, and they will keep on doing business with those countries. Life is going to be a little bit more difficult, and I think an estimate of a contraction of around 10% in the Russian economy is pretty close to the mark. So I think the economy will suffer because of this, but the economy is not going to go in a free fall. And there are, like I've said, many other options available to the Russians as well. The Ukrainian economy, being a much smaller economy with much more damage done to infrastructure, their economy is going to go into free fall, because I think the economy can contract by as much as 50% in the Ukraine. Of course, over time, things can change depending on what's going to happen to sanctions and all that. But their economies are being affected, significantly so, and it will be more affected as time goes by. The rest of the world will be affected as well. We in South Africa are already experiencing high levels of inflation. We're seeing an increase in interest rates, as an example, and the South African economy will suffer because of this as well, and the world economy will suffer because of this as well. And I think the political situation will drag on for a long time, and we will probably going to see sort of a low level, in the best case scenario, probably a low level Cold War kind of situation in that part of the world, which will have a similar kind of impact on the world economy going forward.
Okay, so how much longer? We understand that even Putin himself didn't expect the war to be carrying on this long.
Yeah.
How much longer do you think he's going to hold out? And in terms of the Ukrainian situation, that country is totally devastated.
Yeah.
They are going to, as soon as this war is over, if it does come to an end sometime soon, what is it going to take for some sort of compromise to be reached between Russia and the Ukraine? And when and how are they going to start rebuilding the economy? And what happens to all of that mass migration? Are those people are going to then come back into the Ukraine and
Yeah.
start rebuilding their lives?
Yeah. Maybe on a slightly personal level, let me just
All
share
right, let me
something that
stop
I've.
you there. Let me stop you there. Let's go for an ad break. I'll
Okay.
come back
Okay.
and you can respond to those questions.
All right.
I'm talking to senior economist Dawie Roodt. We're talking about the Russian-Ukrainian situation. Absolutely fascinating take on the situation as he's just returned from Russia. He's married to a Russian woman and they went down to Russia to attend a family wedding. So it's a very different perspective from what we have picked up thus far from international news. So do stay with us. We will continue this discussion right after the ad break.
In the smell of flaxseed oil being applied by my nani. Now I'm using tib blackseed in my own home to soothe sniffles and coughs, to help with digestion and immunity, and of course, as part of my beauty routine. After all these years, I've come to appreciate the wisdom in finding comfort and shifa in trusted treatments like tib blackseed. You can find tib blackseed at all leading pharmacies or find out more at blackseed.co.za.
One of the most important things you can do on this earth is to let people know they are not alone. That the frustration of communities who struggle to earn the very basic is not their cry alone. Discharging your zakah is the starting point for creating a sustainable community and taking action. It's the impetus for creating lasting change and hope. Donate your zakah to the Al Fida Foundation, supporting over 10,000 Muslim families in the Eastern and Western Cape of South Africa. We need your help to assist our neighbors of need. Contact the Al Fida Foundation at 041 484 1288 or view or visit our website at www.alfida.co.za. The Al Fida Foundation, your partner in social investment.
At Sentio, our Invest for Good philosophy is based on a real desire to use our investment skills for the benefit of broader society. We are committed to supporting our community by investing responsibly, giving charitably, and developing talent that will transform the investment industry. As an ethically based asset manager, we are focused on delivering superior risk-adjusted returns for our clients, regardless of market conditions. Visit us at www.sentio-capital.com for more information on our Sharia investment products and start saving with us today. Sentio Capital Management. Invest for good. Sentio Capital Management is an authorized financial services provider.
Imagine fasting and not knowing if you'll have something to eat at iftar. This is a sad reality for thousands of new and indigenous Muslims in southern Africa. Each Ramadan, the Islamic Dawa movement provides iftar meals in township masjids. All it takes is 20 Rand. 20 Rand provides a meal to a Muslim brother, sister, or child. Your help would make a world of difference. Call IDM on 031 304 6883 or visit idmsa.org to donate. IDM, taking Islam to as many hearts and homes as possible.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media, your humanitarian broadcaster.
Welcome back. It is exactly 8:34 a.m. We are talking with senior economist Dawie Roodt. We'll be chatting for at least another 5 to 10 minutes, trying to understand the situation in Russia and the Ukraine. As you've heard, he says there's many sides to the story and obviously propaganda on both or all sides. And obviously, he's just come back from Russia. He went to attend a family wedding, and he has given us an inside view of what is going on in the Ukraine and Russia. So I left him with a couple of questions before the ad
Yeah.
break, and let's get him to respond to us. Welcome back, Dawie.
Thank you very much, Julie. Okay, can I just go? Can you still hear me and see me fine? Can I go
I
through?
can't see you. I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm here and everything seems to be working fine on my side. Okay,
Okay.
if I may share something that I experienced personally, and that is I spoke to a man in the city called Sochi, which is on the Black Sea as well, at this function that we attended, and he told me that his mother, he's a fanatical Putin supporter, and he told me that his mother is in the Ukraine and she had to flee before the Russian soldiers. And I mean, this is one family where the mother is fleeing from the Russian soldiers, while her son is a supporter of Putin itself. That's the kind of situation that you find in that part of the world, where you have families that are divided, and divided on some in the Ukraine and some of them in Russia, like in this example. And of course, that is devastating to this specific family. So I guess before I can answer your question is that we have to understand, we have to try to understand whether the Russians support this or not, and what do they support. First of all, before we can answer the economic questions that you've asked me, first of all, I think the first question is, do the Russians support the invasion? Well, let me just start off by saying all Russians are hyper nationalistic, and they all support the military forces. That's very important to them. And by the way, today is the day that the Russians, the 9th of May, is the day on which the Russians celebrate the victory over Nazi Germany, by the way. So today is a very important day to the Russians, the 9th of May. But so all Russians are supporters of the military forces, very, very nationalistic. Doesn't matter where they are. The second question is that are they in support of the war? And I think most Russians are probably in support of the Russia taking over the Donbas area, like we discussed earlier. That's where the majority are Russians, and where they, according to the Russians, there's a lot of discrimination against ethnic Russians in that area. And the majority of Russians are probably also in support of Russia taking over the Crimea, which used to be part of Russia anyway. But I don't think the majority of Russians are in support of Russia taking over the rest of the Ukraine. I don't think they're in support of that. And then also a very important question is, are people in support of Putin himself? And I think they are without a doubt fanatical Putin supporters, but there are also people that are hugely anti-Putin as well. So the majority of Russians are kind of, I guess, more or less sort of support of the government, not necessarily of the president himself. And also keep in mind that Russia is a huge, huge place. And there are many, many different ethnic groups. And the Russians, majority of Russians will tell you that they want a strong leader, because only a strong leader can keep the place together. So
Okay,
I
so
think,
Dawie, what about, we're hearing a lot about oligarchs' assets being frozen all around the
yeah,
world. Their luxury yachts are
yeah,
being impounded. I think one was just impounded
yeah.
outside of Italy. How does that all play out? What are these guys, the super, super rich, saying about it? Do they have a say in the matter? Because they stand to lose
Yeah,
lots
quite a
of
lot.
assets and money as well. And undoubtedly, they do fund Putin in a very big way.
They don't fund Putin as such. I mean, I think it's the other way around, is that they are very, very powerful and very wealthy people. And the word oligarch, people think it comes from oil. It's nothing to do with oil, by the way. It's a Greek word meaning a few powerful people, basically. No, I think the reason why I mentioned the previous things about Putin and whether he's got support or not. So there could be a couple of outcomes in this whole thing. One is that it can be a Cold War kind of situation, which I think is the most likely outcome. It can lead to a world war, by the way, to a nuclear war. That's a bad case scenario. Or it may lead to eventually Putin may be kicked out. And for that to happen, the military will need to turn against him. Is that likely to happen? It's not impossible, but it's going to be extremely difficult for that to happen. The oligarchs themselves, if they turn against Putin, it's not really going to make much of a difference anyway, because Putin, there is always somebody else that would like to take over those assets within Russia, and there could always be another oligarch or whatever getting involved in that. So the
And I
oligarchs
suppose,
themselves,
Dawie, I suppose he is an oligarch himself, and so
he
are a
is
whole host of his family members.
apparently so, but that information, of course, is very difficult to come by and to verify, but apparently is. But it is about the military in the end. The only way that you can get rid of Putin is the military turns against Putin. At the moment, like I've said, the military is, the military is, the Russians are hyper supportive of their military. It is possible that that can happen, but I think chances actually increase that Putin can eventually be kicked out compared to a couple of weeks or so ago because of the economic hardships or the screws slowly being tightened on a Russian economy. Not that much yet, but that could happen. That is without a doubt a scenario.
Okay, let's bring this conversation back home to South Africa. And let's look at two issues before we touch on South Africa. The EU's chief executive has proposed a recovery plan for the Ukraine once the conflict
Yeah.
is over. That's the big burning question, is it not? When when will the conflict be over? That's the most important question. And then two questions closer to home. God forbid if this does end up in a form of a nuclear, war. Is Africa safe? We're kind of pretty far
Uh,
removed from Europe. Obviously, and the Eastern Bloc countries. We're far removed, but even if we're not directly in the firing line, there will be huge economic repercussions for us. And then let's just end off by looking at our economic situation in South Africa, with this war playing out, very especially regarding fuel, oil, and other food prices.
Okay, will the war end? The answer is the war is not going to end. I can tell you that the Russians are not going to give the Donbas area back. They're not going to give the Crimea back. And I just want to mention that there's another area called Transnistria, which is between Moldova and Ukraine, where a similar sort of situation is playing itself out. And it's quite possible that Russia may decide to get involved there as well. So, like I've said earlier, I think Russia will keep that part, the Donbas area at least, and the Crimea, and they may even take larger chunks of other parts of Ukraine, or maybe even of Moldova, maybe not the whole of the Ukraine. So this war is not going to end, right? And it doesn't matter whether Putin is there or not. So we have to simply learn to live with this. It's a Cold War kind of situation that will go on for a long time. I've also trying, and I'm not a military expert, but I'm trying to understand what the nuclear war will look like. Of course, we all should be very, very concerned about the possibility of a nuclear war, but I think they will make use of technical nuclear weapons, which means we see in the movies that these weapons can destroy big cities, and they can indeed destroy big cities and cause immense damage. But I don't think any side will try to use really big nuclear weapons. They will probably be using smaller, tactical kind of nuclear weapons, which is also quite bad, but it's not as bad as the end of the world kind of scenario. What is the impact going to be on South Africa? We're already seeing an impact on South Africa. Commodity prices will be elevated. I think the impact on the rest of Africa, especially certain areas in Africa, will be much worse. The Ukraine and Russia are significant exporters of food, of grain specifically. And I think we're going to see famine in certain areas of Africa. So we have to be prepared of that as South Africans, that we will have to perhaps support some other places in Africa. I'm referring to places like, for example, the normal places. And not only Africa, Sri Lanka is a good example of that as well. Somalia, Ethiopia, those sort of places. Morocco is a huge importer of grain. Even Egypt, those are places there where food prices will go up and we may see shortages. In South Africa, similarly, South Africa is getting a benefit because high commodity prices is good for us because we are commodity exporters and we are surplus food producers in South Africa. So we can actually export, which is good for our agricultural sector, but it's bad for the consumers in South Africa. So I think we're going to have elevated levels of inflation, higher levels of interest rates because of that, and weaker economic growth. That is at least the short-term scenario for South Africa. Then, of course, it depends on how things will pan out eventually over time. I think if they're successful in trying and not using Russian oil, because some countries are trying to wean themselves of the dependence on Russian energy. If they're successful in that, I'm afraid energy prices will remain elevated, which means that the petrol price will remain high and may even increase further. That sort of thing, and we will have an upward pressure on inflation. So the world economy will be affected by this, and it will be affected negatively.
My final question to you. As we speak, I understand there's a tanker on its way to South African shores with a surplus of Russian oil. Is that destined for South African consumers, South African use, or is it just coming here for some sort of storage purposes? Do you know anything at all about that?
I don't know anything at all about that. But kind of maybe on that trend, we just asked a question, and I don't have an answer to that myself. And that is, how should South Africa position itself here? Should we support the West, or should we support the East? It's not the West East, but you know what I mean. Should we support Russia or not? And the answer to that is, I don't know. I just don't know, because the reality is that China and Russia and India are very important, big economies in the world, and we want to keep on doing business with them. At the same time, our biggest trading partners are the West, and we don't want to get caught on the wrong side of the West. I think the best that we South Africans can do is to try to be as neutral as possible and sort of keep our heads down. Then do not take a position here and sort of try to be neutral. I know it's not always possible, but that would be my advice to our government. Try to take in, and don't try to go and mediate and try to make peace. We are a very, very small country in the world. They're not going to listen to us anyway. Just stay quiet and go and sit in a corner.
Well, I think Cyril Ramaphosa tried that trick. I'm not sure whether he pulled it off or not, because he and Naledi Pandor was speaking, speaking, saying different things to the press. So it made us look quite silly, did it not? But we are going to watch the space very closely. Thank you indeed for your very valuable time, your insights into the situation playing out, in the Ukraine and the Russian position, and also how we and the rest of the world are going to be impacted. We've already been impacted by high food and fuel prices. Till the next time, as always, go well, and a very big thank you for your insight. Dawie Roodt,
thank you.
Senior economist, talking to us about the Russian situation. It is exactly 8:47. Do stand by. We're going to be talking about another very important matter regarding the community and the possible closure of the Adams bookshop. So do stay with us.